والصلاة والسلام على سيدنا محمد وعلى أهل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين. كفاية صلوات اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. So basically, we have been able to go quite ahead, though we are a bit slow. We have reached this section where we are talking about the knowledge value of indirect knowledge. So we talked about the knowledge value of direct knowledge, but now the question that comes is, okay, direct knowledge because we are directly perceiving it and all that, but what about indirect knowledge? And that's why we went into the whole discussion of what are the different types of, conceptualization, and then what are the different types of essence, so that we can see what are the building blocks of an argument. Once we know what are the building blocks of an argument, then we can see that that argument that is being presented, is it a valid argument, is it invalid argument, what value does that argument carry? So basically that's where we are planning to go and discuss in this section. So I think because we missed a few lessons, I would just like to quickly go through the slides of the previous session. Just a very quick look, and then we can start today's session. So we discussed about the types of universal concepts, which was very important. It was a milestone in our discussion. Okay, we talked about what is a universal concept first, how universal concepts are formed. So what did we say? How are they formed? If you remember, how are these universal concepts formed? If you remember. Yes, you have various sensual, you can say you've got various sensual particular concepts in your mind, and then you take various concepts and then you extract a general concept out of it. Okay, or you see, for example, three causes, this is a cause, that is a cause, this is also a cause, you see that it's creating an effect. Then from these various things you take a general concept and you apply that general concept to several things. I think that is clear. Then we talked about concepts of quiddity. We said concepts of quiddity, if you remember, what are they? What are concepts of quiddity? Exactly, the nature, the texture, the way it is in the external world, the quiddity. That's why it's called quiddity. Actually, if you look at the dictionary, it's to do with the reality of entities, the way they are, their texture, their color, their shape. How are they? They are intelligent, they are not intelligent. You see? Are they carnivorous? Are they tame? So these are the ones that you extract by looking, by hearing, by conceiving small objects, the specific objects, and then you take out a general concept. Now then we came to the philosophical concept. Philosophical concepts, how do you generate it? How are they generated? Through what? The key word is relationships. Relationships between entities. You look at two entities, you see their relationship, and you take out a concept. This is the basic thing. Then you can remember these examples and it becomes easy. And of course, we came to a very big conclusion that even these social concepts that we have, like, laws, rules and regulations, justice, spouse, ownership, all of these are concepts of philosophy, or just philosophical concepts. And we came to logical concepts. We said they are attributes of, yes, they are attributes of concepts that are in the mind. Logical concepts are attributes of concepts that are in the mind. Like what? Universal, particular. This is a universal concept. This is a particular concept. Okay? This is an axiomatic concept. This is a reflective concept. Whatever is an attribute of a concept is discussed in logical concept. So this was what we discussed last time. Now what we want to discuss today is now the background, like the backbone of trying to understand what is indirect knowledge, because now we want to know the knowledge value. Then inshallah we'll go to the other sources of knowledge that are there. There are various other sources like shuhud. We'll discuss to a certain degree what is shuhud, inshallah, if we get the opportunity. Now, we say that, knowledge value is how much you can trust a certain type of knowledge. How much will it show you reality? That is easy. Now, when you see that a knowledge conforms completely to the reality, that is what type of knowledge? True knowledge. Which does not conform with reality is false knowledge. Now, if you remember, conceptualization is one of the forms of ilm husuli. Tasawwur, which is conceptualization, is one of the forms of ilm husuli or indirect knowledge. But does conceptualization make any judgment about reality? No. So there is no need to discuss about the knowledge value of conceptualization, because they just tell you it's just a concept. Why should we discuss about the knowledge value? A concept, unless it tries to tell you that it is, when you make a judgment, is when there is the concept, that's when the idea comes. Whether is this true or is it false? Otherwise, the concept is concept. You can conceptualize anything you want in your mind. Yes. Exactly. When you make that judgment is when it becomes an essence. But as long as you are just conceptualizing and there is no judgment, then it doesn't have any knowledge value. You can conceptualize, imagine, and it won't carry any value. But essence is a type of indirect knowledge that makes a judgment about reality. It wants to tell you this is and this is not. This is where the discussion of knowledge value comes in. Now is where we discuss the knowledge value. Now, so we say that we talked about conforming to reality. When you look at the whole idea of reality, there is a kind of a confusion. What is reality? What is reality that you're talking about? And where is this reality? This is where we need to discuss a bit. See, sometimes this reality that you're talking about is in the external realm. So, for example, when I say fire burns wood, I make this statement, isn't it? What is it? Is it an essence or is it a conceptualization? It's an essence. Why? Because I'm making a command. I'm making a hukum. I'm saying fire burns. But look, I want you to just open your mind a bit. If I tell you to imagine a burning piece of wood, what is this? It's a conceptualization. So notice, I'm telling you a very important issue. Sometimes something might look same in the conceptualization bit. You are conceptualizing a burning piece of wood. See? You're conceptualizing a burning piece of wood. But it's still a conceptualization. When does it become an essence? When you say something about reality. Do you see that? When I want to attribute this to reality. When I say fire burns wood, I don't say a burning piece of wood, because a burning piece of wood is just a conceptualization. It doesn't say anything about reality. But as soon as I say fire burns wood, now I'm attributing this to reality. Now where is this reality? This reality is what? Beyond the mind, outside the mind, in the outside world. Okay, give me examples of this. This is one example. Fire burns wood. It's outside. Other examples. Yes. Heat melts ice. It's outside. What else? Gravity pulls whatever, gravel or stones, apples. Okay, let me ask you. What about God exists? What about God exists? Is human existence? Well, if it's only human existence, so there are so many humans, so then we like never divide. God will divide in their existences, or how is it? Yes. Yes. It's in all three. Okay, this is close to the answer, but there is something I want to I want you to pay attention to here. Is that when we talk about external reality, when we may talk about external reality, we mean to say the realm beyond concepts. The realm that is beyond concepts. That's when we talk about external reality. So these points that I'm mentioning, it is not there in the slide, nor is in the notes. If you can write them down, it's important. When I talk about external reality, I mean the realm beyond concepts. So when I say God exists, it's in the external reality. Because God is beyond concepts. You understand what I'm saying, yeah? In fact, sometimes you can take the concepts in a mind of someone else's mind, and you as a person look at those concepts. So it's as if it's like this. You look at that person, and now you're opening his mind, and you're looking at his concepts. See what you're doing? You are looking at the world around you. At the same time, you're opening his mind, let's say. You open his mind with a laptop, and now you're there looking at his concept. See, in this situation also, you are now looking at him, and you are looking at his concept as an external entity. Now you are judging those concepts. How are they? What is a concept? How is it? So don't go there. Don't go there right now. Just simply I want to tell you that when we talk about external realm, means the realm, don't look at the mind, the physical mind, and think beyond this physical mind. No. Think of the realm of concepts and say the realm beyond concepts when I say this. Inshallah, it will open up slowly as I go ahead. Sometimes it is inside the human existence. Inside the human existence, like what? Like I am happy. I'm saying right now, I am happy. Okay? Various examples like this. What else can we say? For example, give me other examples. So here notice the reality is where? Inside the human existence. Other examples? Simple, yeah? I'm confused. Okay? What about I am thinking? Okay? Things like that. These are things that are now issues that are of internal human existence. So where will be the reality? The reality will be based on that. So if I say I am happy, and really inside my existence I am happy, then it becomes a true statement. If I say I am happy, but in reality I am not happy, it becomes a false statement. So the reality here is the inside the human existence. Now I'm just dividing this, but in the reality, if you look at it in depth, this inside the human existence is also, you can say, in the external realm. Why? Because it's beyond the realm of concepts. And you remember I told you the external world is beyond the realm of concepts. So what is inside the human existence also in a way is external realm. But I didn't want to open it up because then you'll get confused. External realm, but what is this? You'll get. That's why I wanted you to. I separated this to simplify the work. But if you go in depth, in terms of logical depth, the reality of the issue is that even what is inside the human existence, what happens is the external realm, because it is beyond the realm of concepts. Okay. Now the third. Now, sometimes it is in the mind. This is now the realm of concepts. It's now in the mind. Like what? A human being is a universal concept. What else did we say? For example, give me other example. Yes? 2 is an even number. Okay, good. 2 is an even number. Yeah, because all of these are concepts, by the way. 2 is an even number. Yeah, but it's a fact. But where is the fact? The fact is in the mind. Yes, it is referred in the outside world, but the fact is in the mind. 2 is an even number. The word even is a logical concept. The word even. Because it's a concept, it's an attribute of a concept in the mind, which is 2. Yeah, 2 is there in the outside world. Wait a second. No. Let us reverse a bit. This is a philosophical concept, by the way. 2 is an even number. 2-ness. You remember I told you multitudeness and oneness. Yeah, what concepts are these? Philosophical concepts. So whenever you say 2 is what? Is a philosophical concept. When you say 2 is an even number, it's still that evenness of the 2 is not looking at the 2 as a concept, but as the same is not looking at the 2 as a concept in the mind only, but as a philosophical concept, which also has an external reality. So remember, we talked about philosophical concepts as such. They're concepts in the mind, but they also point to something outside. Logical concepts are not like that. They just are attributes of things in the mind. Anyway, let's not go very much deep into that. So sometimes just in the mind, like what human being is a universal concept. This is just in the mind. It's not outside. It's not. But if I say, let me give you another example. If I say fire is the cause of heat, where is this? Where is the reality here? Yes. Fire is a cause of heat. Where is this reality? External world. This is the external world, beyond the mind. See? Because I'm saying fire is a cause of heat. If I say, for example, okay, if I say a tree, what do you call it? A seed is a potential tree. What is that? Yes, but potential actualization were what? Philosophical concepts. Philosophical concepts have a reality in the mind, but they show the external realm. But they don't show the reality of that issue. Remember the final table that I showed you? They don't tell you the nature of that atom, that thing. They don't tell you the nature of that thing. They just tell you the relationship it has with other things. If you remember that, yeah? So when I say this, when I say, for example, a seed is a potential tree, the reality of this is in the external world. The reality. Just see where the judgment is made. The judgment is about the external world or about a concept in the mind. It's about the external world. So then you know the reality is in the external world. Now, as such, we notice that reality can be in the realm outside the human mind, or within the human mind, or within the existence of the human being. Therefore, it doesn't matter what the realm of reality is. What is important is that at any given statement should be able to conform to reality. It doesn't matter. The reality is inside the heart of a human being. It's outside. What is important is that statement should be true, whether it is within the human existence, outside the human existence, or in the external realm. Now we go to the next slide. Okay, this is just a reminder. Knowledge value can only apply to essence and not to conceptualization. Why? I already said this in the start. Is present? No, not yet. Not yet. Okay, that's true. What else? Exactly. Because essence has a judgment. Concept doesn't have a judgment. See? It's just a concept. That's why we talk about its knowledge value. Now, knowledge value of axiomatic essence. Now, I just want to explain to you this. See, you remember I talked about axiomatic essence. Who remembers what are axiomatic essence? Yes. Immediate judgment. That means that judgment which doesn't require other judgments to make it up. The judgment itself, when you just look at it, you admit. You don't need another 2-3 judgments to come and support it. You remember, like I told you, I am happy. You don't need other judgments to come and support it. But I am suffering from malaria. I am suffering, I am having fever, I am having sickness. Until the final state that you make the judgment that I am suffering from malaria takes time. You need time. Maybe you are suffering from another disease. So you need several essence to come and confirm that. Okay? These are, now, in axiomatic essence, there are 2 types. There are primary axiomatic essence and there are secondary axiomatic essence. What is the difference? In primary axiomatic essence, okay, it is enough to conceptualize the two parts of the essence to come to a conclusion. What do I mean? Can someone help me? What do I mean? The 2 parts of an essence. What do I mean? What are the 2 parts of an essence? You know, in English we are talking about subject and predicate. That it is. Subject and predicate. Now, let me give you an example. The example that is here, every whole is bigger than its parts. For example, a car, a toy car, is whole, is bigger than its parts. That means tire, whatever, door, you know, the small man inside driving. All of it, it's bigger than, a whole is bigger than a part. Now, when you look at this statement, a whole is bigger than its parts, in order to come to this conclusion, you just have to conceptualize the concept of whole, conceptualize the concept of parts, and conceptualize the concept of bigness, and your mind will judge straight away. It doesn't need anything else. Your mind will say, of course it's bigger. When I conceptualize whole, part, bigness, my mind tells you, yeah, whole is bigger than part, definitely. This is called an axiomatic, primary axiomatic essence, because you don't need anything else apart from just conceptualizing the parts. You conceptualize the parts, the answer comes. Pop, automatically your light, that bulb inside shines. Because that's how quick it is. Okay? Or for example, I say everything is itself. Everything is itself. You are yourself. Now here also, look, when I say everything, and then you say itself, your mind, when it says everything and then itself, when it conceptualizes the 2, it immediately realizes that, yeah, they are 2, they are 1. Each thing is itself. There is no differentiation between the 2. So the mind comes to that conclusion. Or for example, to be and not to be. To be and not to be cannot be together in one thing. You can't have something that is there and not there. To be and not to be. So mind, when it says to me, when it conceptualizes to me, and it conceptualizes not to me, and it conceptualizes togetherness, the mind says, no, it can't. Naturally, it can't. There's no, it's not possible. Does anyone have to teach you? Do you have to be taught, Baba, it's not possible, you know, something that is there. It's not there, it's not possible. If you don't understand, speak up. Anyone tells you that, no, you don't need to be told. As from a young age, just you know that. That's the way your mind is. it conceptualizes two things like that, the conclusion is reached. For example, every father has a child. Every father has a child. When you conceptualize father, father is what? Father is someone who has a child, isn't it? So when you conceptualize father in child, and then the fact that being, because when you say, has, I want to just tell you something. See, has, is, all of these represent being. Being. I said he has something, means that thing is with him. That thing is being with him. So whenever there is has, is, was, the concept of being comes to the mind. The concept of being. So when you say every father has a child, three concepts come to your mind. One, father, child, and the concept of being with. Being with. That means has. Being with. So when it conceptualizes these three, the mind judges. Okay, now what about every cause has an effect? Who can help me out here? What are the three concepts that come to the mind, and how is the judgment made? Every cause, every effect has a cause. How is that done? Okay, so you conceptualize the concept of cause, conceptualize effect, and then you conceptualize the has. What was has? Being with. Being with. So you conceptualize being with has, being with effect. You says yes, correct. They're together. See? Now what is the reason? Why does the mind conclude like this so fast? Why? What is the reason behind it? The scholars say that the reason is because of the strong relationship that exists between the two concepts, between the concepts that are there. You know those concepts that I talked about. So for example, the concept whole and the concept part, okay, they have a strong relationship between one another. Who can explain this relationship? Yes, the parts is what makes up the whole. And when you divide the whole, it is the parts. So in reality, if you go and see, in these axiomatic essence which are primary, it's as if you are breaking down a concept. It's as if you look at the whole, just one concept whole, and you broke up that whole and you saw their parts. And you're saying part is, is smaller than a whole. Yes. Bigness, yeah. Yeah. No. Is. Yeah. So anyways, yeah, it's good. It's good. You have opened it up like that. That's very good. Exactly, that's how it is. But you see, the mind is so quick in doing that. So the mind takes all these concepts and joins them together and concludes. But the main focus here is whole and part and bigness. So when your mind contemplates, because there's a strong relationship between whole and part, as she explained, and then also when you look at compare it to the concept of bigness, immediately your mind says whole is definitely bigger than part because of the relation. Same now, you go like that. Entity in itself. Why entity in itself? What is the relationship between each entity and itself? They are the same. They are one and the same. They are not different. So it's not like you have said two things. When you say each entity is itself, it's just to explain some people who are sick. Some people they say, nah, each entity might not be itself. So just to explain to them, that Baba, no, each entity is itself. What do you mean it's not itself? I'm saying if you go to Western psychology and philosophy, you'll be surprised at how all bacha, sometimes when they are tired and they just make some statements like big words. Some of them are like that. Just want to waste time. Some of the Western philosophy. What about being and not being? What is the relationship between being and not being? The opposite. Exactly. In fact, not being is just the absence of being. Not being is just the absence of being. So there's a very strong relationship between being and not being, because it's the absence. So that's why the mind easily, the mind easily just makes the conceptualization. And of course, father is someone who has a child. In fact, look at cause and effect. You cannot define effect without understanding cause. You cannot define cause without understanding effect. They're so strongly related. Because cause is one which has an effect. Effect is one. So this is how primary axiomatic essence are derived. Now I want to ask you, we'll come to that inshallah, about the knowledge value. We'll come to it slowly. Now there is something called secondary axiomatic essence. What are secondary axiomatic essence? And why are they called secondary? They are called secondary. Now when it says axiomatic essence, what are axiomatic essence in Arabic? Tasdeeq, tasdeeq badihi. Tasdeeq. And essence is tasdeeq. Tasdeeq, just to show you, tasdeeq is in the Quran, when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala told Nabi Ibrahim alayhi salam saw the dream 3 times. And then when he went to slaughter Nabi Ismail, Allah told him, قَدْ صَدَّقْتَ الرُّؤْيَا. Certainly you believed in the dream. So tasdeeq is where there is a judgment. Tasdeeq. قَدْ صَدَّقْتَ الرُّؤْيَا. You made a judgment and your judgment was right, that this dream was true. قَدْ صَدَّقْتَ الرُّؤْيَا. Okay? So that's what's tasdeeq, an essence. Essence is a judgment. Axiomatic is badihi. Badihi means, something that is obvious, something that is direct and quick. So, in secondary axiomatic essence, apart from just conceptualizing the parts of the essence, you need another thing, apart from conceptualizing the parts. And what is that thing? That thing is the direct knowledge that you have about your feelings. That's why it's called secondary, because in the primary you didn't have to have any direct knowledge. You remember, you just conceptualize cause, effect. When you say cause needs an effect, okay? You just conceptualize whole is bigger than part. It's enough. Here, no, you need something else. And that is the direct knowledge of the internal feelings like hunger, like happiness, etc. So for example, when I'm saying I am happy, first I have the conceptualization of I. I have the conceptualization of happiness. And am, as I said, when you say am, what is the concept that comes from am? Being. Exactly. I am being happy. Like I have that happiness is in me. Okay? Am means this is in me. So now, what happens when these two concepts come together? You need something else, and that is your presential knowledge of your happiness. Without your presential knowledge of your happiness, by just conceptualizing, you'll not get, because there is no relationship between I and happiness. Is there? But in cause and effect, there is a relationship. Between whole and part, there is a relationship. Between I and happiness, there is no. Between I and scared, there is no internal relationship between the concepts. So you need something else, and that is your ilm huduri, your presential knowledge about that thing. That is why this is called secondary axiomatic essence. Inshallah. Besides the salawat, wow. These subjects become dry, you need a glass of water to make them a bit wet. Yeah, very dry. Okay. In primary, you just compare the concept. You don't need anything else apart from that. In secondary axiomatic, apart from comparing the concepts, you need something else, and that is the ilm huzuri, the presential knowledge. Okay, what about I am thinking? What type of axiomatic what the essence is this? Yes? Secondary. Okay, now I forgot to tell you one thing here. There is, in secondary, axiomatic essence is just an essence, an axiomatic essence that requires something apart from conceptualization of parts. One of the types of secondary axiomatic essence is sensa, which is wijdaniyat. Sensa is a type of secondary axiomatic essence, where that thing, that extra thing that you require apart from conceptualizing the parts is what? In the huzuri of your internal feelings. But there are other types of secondary axiomatic essence that I don't want to mention right now because it will complicate the issue too much, because that becomes logic then. Logic inshallah afterwards. But this is just to tell you that sensa is one of those secondary axiomatic things. Now, so when you come to, for example, I am thinking, what is this? As you said rightfully, it's sensa. So just in simple words, this becomes sensa. Don't use those big words. Sensa. Okay. What about I exist? Primary. Why do you say primary? Good. Okay. Remember in primary I said that there should be a strong relationship between the subject and the predicate in terms of conceptualizing it. When you conceptualize I, is it necessary in conceptualizing I to first conceptualize existence? No. To conceptualize I don't need to first conceptualize existence. So it is not a primary axiomatic essence. What is it? It's a secondary axiomatic essence. Why? Because there is no direct relationship between I and existence. Concept of existence is concept of existence. Concept of I is concept of I, me. They are two different concepts. So you need something else. What is that? Your internal understanding, your ilm huzuri, your direct knowledge of your existence, your direct knowledge of yourself. You see? You need that direct knowledge also here. That's why it's what? It's a secondary thing. Okay, what about I love my mother? What is this? Secondary. It's a sensa. Correct. Okay, we go to the next one. Okay, we'll end in the short while. We'll end here, then we can have a short break and come back. So, what is their knowledge value? What is the knowledge value of axiomatic essence? What are the knowledge value of the axiomatic essence? Now, I just want to tell you one thing. Notice that both type of axiomatic essence are kind of strongly related to presential knowledge. Why? The final essence that you make, that essence, when you say a whole, the whole is bigger than the part. Or we say the cause, every father, what are those examples? I don't know. Every father is a child, what else? Every effect is a cause, what else? Each entity is itself. Okay. All of these that I mentioned, notice that in them, the final judgment that I make, the final judgment that is made, is because I presentially direct am seeing the relationships in my heart. Look, okay, you are conceptualizing whole, isn't it, in your mind? You're conceptualizing part, and you're conceptualizing bigness. All of this conceptualization is happening in front of your existence. You see, it's not like somewhere far. It's happening in front of you. It's like you are seeing something. Let me just give you an example. Like you actually see things happening in front of you. You see, for example, there is a ball here and children are playing with it. It's not like you're seeing it. Now only this is inside your internal world. You're conceptualizing whole, you're conceptualizing part, you're conceptualizing bigness, and your mind makes a judgment. So that is why we are saying that for primary axiomatic essence, or awwaliyat, the other name in Arabic is awwaliyat. That was wijdaniyat or sensa, this is awwaliyat. When I say awwaliyat, don't be confused, it means this. The conformity to reality is also clear because it's perceived directly. Inside your heart, you're perceiving that conformity to reality. The bigness of the whole in comparison to the past, you are witnessing it inside, isn't it? Yes? So that is why badihiyat, if there is a badihi statement, if it's an awwali statement, an essence, an awwali, it can never be wrong. It's always correct. It's always right. That's why the knowledge value of axiomatic essence, which are awwali, is what? Is very high. Rather, it's 1. So we'll compare 1 and 0. If it doesn't have any knowledge value, is 0. If it has full knowledge value, is 1. Then whatever is between, whatever has little will be, for example, 0.1, 0.2, 0.5. If it's half, it will be 0.5. If it is, for example, let me give you an example. You hear someone saying that, Hassan's car broke down. One person tells you, inshallah, maybe, I don't know, maybe he didn't see properly, so you'll see 0.5. But when 2 people come and tell you, it will become 0.8 now. Isn't it? Because now the value increases. Still you are not sure, but it's 0.8. And 3, 4, 5, 6 people come, now it becomes 1. We'll come to it afterwards, the knowledge value, how is it calculated, inshallah, when we get there. That is why, in the riwayat, we've got mutawatir. Mutawatir riwayat means not one person narrates to you. 10 people, 20 people narrate to you. So naturally your mind concludes to the answer. It says, yeah, definitely this is true. Then there is khabar wahid. All this, you'll notice, you'll understand, this all that we are studying gets applied everywhere, in fiqh, usul, in falsafa, everywhere. Okay. The same can be said regarding wijdaniyat. So for instance, when I'm saying, I am hungry, the concepts I, hunger, and existence, as I said, am is what? Existence. That means that hunger is existing for this person. I, hunger, and existence are conceptualized in the mind and are therefore perceived directly by the mind. I is conceptualized by the mind, and the heart, the nafs, is conceptualizing it directly. I, hunger, existence of hunger for I. Now, there is a third thing that it compares it, and that is its internal state of hunger. So the mind, when it sees that, I'm also hungry, really, in my heart, I'm seeing that I'm hungry, the mind makes a judgment. It said, yes, I'm hungry. You see? And because all this is happening directly in front of you, and your heart is perceiving all of it, and it's comparing these concepts to what is you're feeling inside, it makes the judgment, and the judgment is always correct. And since all of this is an important part, and since all of this is overlooked directly by the nafs, the whole process is being overlooked directly by the nafs. That means there is no point where this could be wrong. It could not be wrong at all. This is a very important thing, and it cannot be doubted. Inshallah. Okay, so we end here, and we go for a break. Now this is the important part. I'll try to round up this a bit quickly, might end up faster. The knowledge value of reflective essence. Now, as you know, reflective essence are those that need other essence for helping them out, yeah? So they are not as obvious as those ones. Now, what I want you to do now is the style of teaching will change a bit. I'll keep silent for like 30 seconds, you read just this, right? You read it, try to understand it, and one who has understood, raise their hand and explain me. Just try to read what is there. Done? This is easy, isn't it? Who is ready? Yes, yes, and yes. Okay. Okay, it depends now what reality you're talking about. For example, existence of God, you cannot explain exactly who God is, but to just prove that there is a God, that is possible. But who is God exactly? No, that is not possible. So, but here he's trying to say something a bit simpler than that. He went a bit more deep, if I'm straight. Like, so this is a bit lesser than that, a bit simpler version. Yes, please. Anyone. It's easy actually, you already know this. Yes. Yes. Okay, yes, good, very good, yes. Yes, very good. So what is this? What we are trying to say is here, you come across in your life so many reflective statements. Someone comes and tells you, about different things, Now, about Marzak, Marzak, this will happen, this will not happen. Okay. Some people make statements about the hereafter, about angels. All these statements are all reflective statements, they are reflective essence. All these classes that you go, all the members that you listen, all the science lectures, physics, chemistry, biology, medicine, all of them are reflective essence. How do I know the value of this reflective essence that I'm all listening all this time? What value do they have? You see, simple statements that I mentioned here, like God is there. God is there at a certain level becomes obvious, but at a certain level it's not obvious. For many people it's not obvious. But for some people who feel God's presence with the heart, for them it becomes obvious. So what type of knowledge would that be then? Yes? Yes, direct knowledge. Exactly. That would be direct knowledge. When they feel the presence of God directly. So there are people who for them then this becomes more than obvious. But unfortunately for some people it's not like that. So for them, they have to prove it through concepts. For them it's not clear, it's not obvious. They have to come across proof. So, or a human being has a soul. Does a human being have a soul? It's just a body. It's also it's a reflective essence. You need to bring proof. Why human being has a soul? So all those proofs that I'm bringing, what knowledge value do they have? What knowledge value do all these proofs have? Yeah? And for example, the world is round. So for example, for the world is round, they saw that there's a ship. You look at the ship, it's coming upwards slowly. First it's the what do you call it, the chimneys are shown, and then after the chimneys, for example, the mast, and then slowly the whole ship is seen as it comes up. So they said that the world is round. Why? Because it's coming from down up, so there's a curve. Yeah, that's how this is. There's a curve. So from observation, you know that. This is also it's also something that is an essence, because through that observation, then you conclude that there must be a curve. Because there's a curve, it must be a circle throughout. You see, like that. It's a whole logical procedure that has taken place. Now, we come to this next slide. We go the same way now. Just let me just enlarge the fonts. This is very simple also, it's similar to what we said. Okay. Now, another 1 minute or half a minute. I think this is easy. You already know this, yeah? Okay, so we go ahead. This is easy. Just saying what is an axiomatic and what is axiomatic and what is reflective. Now the next one. How do we prove these realities? Because we cannot feel them directly. The only way we can prove them is through the process of through indirect knowledge. Okay, so let's just look at this. Remember, since a person cannot directly perceive the conformity of reflective essence to reality, what does this mean? Yes. Okay. You remember when I was talking about axiomatic essence, I told you that that the mind perceives the conformity directly. Because why? In the primary one, in awaliyat, it sees the relationships in front of it. Bigness, smallness. In the next one, the sensa. In the sensa, it sees that I'm happy, and it compares to the concept and the concept. So the whole conformity is direct. But here it's not like that. The only way to prove it is the indirect way, which is through the process of induction, logical induction. So we'll come to what is logical induction. This is a bit of a difficult statement now from here. So here see, how do we come to this conclusion that a certain reflective essence is correct or not? There is one way. What is that way? By comparing it to an axiomatic essence. Pay attention. I'm explaining you this, then I want you to read. First, let's listen to my explanation, then you read. Because I know axiomatic essence I can prove, isn't it? Because they are direct. Then how can I what should I do to be able to prove my reflective essence? I take my reflective essence and I compare them to my axiomatic essence. When I compare them to the axiomatic essence, I see that if I, for example, deny one of the reflective essence, if I deny it, it causes a denial of one of the axiomatic essence. Then I come to know, then I shouldn't deny this. I should accept this. Let me give you an example. Look at this statement. The universe has a creator. The universe has a creator. The universe has a creator is what? Is it a reflective essence or is it a axiomatic essence? It's a reflective essence. Okay? Now, but it is related to an axiomatic essence. What is that? Every limited existing being has a cause. You notice that? It is related to that axiomatic essence, which is every limited existent being has a cause. Now, if I, for example, if I deny, I say that the universe has no creator. If I say the universe has no creator, I will be indirectly denying this. Yes, I'll be indirectly denying this. Because I'll be indirectly denying this, you have to now stop and say that no, I cannot deny this because it is related to this other essence. Now in logic, I'm not opening this up right now, but in logic, inshallah, that's why I'm planning the next module will be a logic module. In logic, you'll start to see the relationships that exist between the universe as a creator and every limited existing being has a cause. Just to give you a glimpse of the relationship. Universe is an example of what? Of a limited existing being. Isn't it? Is universe unlimited? It's limited. So, universe is an example of a limited being. Cause, creator, is an example of a cause. So notice this whole statement, the universe as a creator, is a subset of this major statement. Every living being has a cause. So because you deny one of the parts of the subset, you are actually denying the generality of this concept. Because this concept, this whole idea, every limited existing being has a cause, is a universal concept. It's a universal concept. When you deny one of its examples, when I'm saying this example is not correct, then what are you doing? You are destroying the universality of that idea. While the universality of this idea, every limited being has a cause, is an obvious, it's a badihi awali. It is a primary axiomatic essence. Okay, I know the Arabic, the English is a bit different. It's a primary axiomatic essence. Okay, who can explain me why is it a primary axiomatic essence? This concept here. Every limited being, every limited existing being has a cause. Why is it a primary axiomatic essence? It's one and the same. How is it one and the same? You have to open it up. Okay, this cause and effect. But we are now talking about limited being and cause. These are two a bit different concepts. How do you relate them? Yes. What is
there is something that exists and what is that as a cause?
Very good. Good, very good. See, what does it mean that something is limited? When you want to understand the limitation, it has an end. Or rather, let me open this up for you. Now I'm trying to show you how you derive an axiomatic essence which is primary. This is crucial. If you understand this, is very good. See, and this is one of the very, very easy proofs of the existence of God. Just right now, just by understanding, just by conceptualizing. That's why sometimes, because people don't study these, abstract things, they can't, they can't then think further. See, what does it mean by limitation? Limitation means that, limited in terms of existence means that this being, it doesn't have existence in itself. How do you know that? Whenever there is a being which is limited, can you imagine that it doesn't exist? A limited being. Can you imagine that it doesn't exist? A limited being. For example, this computer is limited. Can you imagine that it's not there? You can. Can you imagine it's there? You can. Okay? That means that when there is something limited, it can either be there or not there. A limited being. Now, since limitation means that it can be there in existence or be not there in existence, now that it is existing, a limited existing being, because we said in terms of its existence, it can either be there or it can be not there. Now that it's existing, it has to have a cause. Now that you are saying this limited being is existing, and it doesn't have, when it is limited means it doesn't have existence in itself. Its existing means this thing that is not existing came to existence. It doesn't have existence in itself, so it must have been, this thing that was not existing was brought into existence. Was brought into existence means it has a cause. So you remember how we did the primary axiomatic references? We said that there is a relationship between these concepts, the subject, limited existing being, and a cause. So you saw the relationship now that exists. Because whenever you say something is limited, means it doesn't have existence in itself. Now that you say it's limited and existing, because it doesn't have existence in itself, then where should it get in existence? From something else. So from within the concept of limited existing being, you have understood the concept of cause. And that's why they are primary axiomatic concept. And that's why this concept is Badihi. It's a primary axiomatic concept. And this, the universe as a creator, is one example, is one part, is one, you can say, application of this general statement. And because this statement is universal, it doesn't have any exception. When you deny one of it, it's as if you are denying the axiomatic concept. That is why when you compare this statement to an axiomatic concept, you get an answer. Then you cannot deny this. Now look, from this very statement, I've proven the existence of God, for those who are sharp. You've just proven the existence of God. Simply. That God exists.
But you prove that there is a cause. They said there can be another cause.
No, like what? Okay. At the end of the day, we prove that there is a cause. Now, yeah. Now, what is their cause? Maybe they differ. They say the cause is an internal energy. Okay, then we start to discuss. Then there in theology, we discuss. Can it just be energy? Energy is limited also. Okay. Yeah. Then you come to cause. So this is one example. Another very beautiful example that was given here. No, this was my example. Someone gave it. Is that I know this one. The statement, I can't know anything. I can't, there are some people that say, there's a new theory of epistemology. They say we can't know anything. You can disprove this statement. Now, see, when we are talking about an essence can either be an acceptance or a denial. It doesn't necessarily have to be an acceptance. It can be an acceptance or it can be a denial. Now, when I say, for example, I can't know anything. Now, I want to this I can't know anything. Okay, is not an axiomatic essence, isn't it? It's not an axiomatic because it needs reflection. What do you mean? I can't know anything. It needs reflection. You see that, okay, you prove it. Why I can't know anything? Because of this and this and this reason. But now this, I can't know anything. Okay, I can't know anything. I have to compare it with another statement which is axiomatic. And if I can forge a communication, a connection between the two, then I can either prove or disprove this statement. Now look, I can't know anything is related to a statement. And what is that statement? I know something. I want to ask you one thing. Is I know something an axiomatic statement or a reflective statement? It's an axiomatic statement because right now you know something. At least something you know. Something you know, a bit like 1 plus 1, 2. That so you know. Or you don't know even that. Okay, let's say he says that no. Let's say he says no, that one even I don't believe. 1 plus 1 is 2. Maybe I don't know. Well, you are saying I know. Maybe I don't know. Who says I don't know? So you say, what was your first statement? You said that I can't know anything. Okay. Do you know that you don't know anything? Yeah. So once you say, I know that I don't know anything, that at least you know something. So that you see this axiomatic statement, I know something, negates that reflective statement. Therefore, you come to an essence and you deny this statement. Which statement? I can't know anything. So this is how you can live. You know, these people say, I can't know anything. I have doubts in everything. I know this is, you disprove in this. I have doubts in everything. Nothing can be trusted. So what about this statement that you are saying? Nothing can be trusted. Are you trusting it or not? Oh, no, this can be trusted. So how can you give an exception to it? Is it a general statement or not? What do you mean it can be trusted? See? That's how you argue with them. And that's how you open up. And how is it? This is the way it is. You compare reflective essence to an axiomatic essence, and that's how you come to the conclusion. Yes. Yes. Yeah, God exists is not God exists. It is not necessarily an axiomatic essence because for some it's not obvious. For some it's obvious because they feel the presence of God. But for those who don't feel the presence of God, they have to understand what is cause, what is effect, what is creation, what is created, and from those concepts they finally come to the existence of God. It's not axiomatic. Why? Because it needs a lot of conceptualization. You have to first see that, for example, the ship is going up, you have to observe. Then after observe, you conclude that because the ship is coming up, there is a curve. And because there is a curve, this curve has to be everywhere. All this it requires a lot of effort, yeah. So that's why it's not there. Okay. Now, we come to the next one. Now here, this is a very important part, brothers and sisters. This is something that you really, this was the essence of the whole discussion, because this is what we are facing, yeah? So I want you to pay utmost attention to this. And when you go home, read the notes carefully, because the notes are self-explanatory, you get everything. So, notice that the knowledge value of reflective essence can only be substantiated once it is shown that it is based on and is supported by axiomatic essence. You remember, you either compare it, once you compare, you see that it doesn't fit with that, then you deny it, or if it is based on an axiomatic essence. But now, how can I show that this axiomatic essence, this reflective essence, is related to or is based on axiomatic essence? It is through the process of istidlal, through the process of logical induction. And this is in mantiq, logic. Logic you'll study what is the meaning of logical induction. In other words, a reflective essence can only have value if it is a result of or it is entailed by an axiomatic essence. See, reflective knowledge, because it doesn't have reflective knowledge itself, this you read afterwards, I'll just put it for guidance. You see, reflective knowledge, because it is not directly perceived, it needs help. The help comes from essence. What am I saying? It comes from essence, from other. sorry, from axiomatic essence. I'm sorry, I'm reading the help comes from axiomatic essence. So, how do I forge a connection between reflective essence and axiomatic essence? Through istidlal. So, istidlal, you can link this reflective essence to several what do you call it, axiomatic essence, or one axiomatic essence, however many axiomatic essence you can link it to. Let me give you an example. The statement force of gravity exists, gravitational force. Is gravitational force axiomatic or reflective? Reflective. Why? Because what you see outside is this thing falling. This cup falling. This cup falling. Is it reflective or axiomatic? Axiomatic. Because you are seeing it directly. Isn't it? I told you what you see. For example, you see a red light. You see this falling. This is axiomatic because you are seeing it. It's obvious, isn't it? You can't deny that it's falling or not. Or there is a discussion, Sophie's group.
So if it's falling, it is axiomatic. Now, nothing moves unless it is moved. So this is a type of I'm showing a type of istidlal. Nothing moves unless. How do I prove that gravity exists? Nothing moves unless it is moved. This is one statement. And since an apple moves downwards from a tree to the ground, there must be a force that has pulled it down. Otherwise it couldn't move. Because they say nothing moves unless it is moved. But I'm saying the apple is moving from up to down. Okay? Now what about the statement nothing moves unless it is moved? Now why did I bring this? Look, I want to prove this gravity exists. It's a reflective statement, a reflective essence. I'm using this other essence, nothing moves unless the apple moves downwards. I'm using this to link that statement to an axiomatic essence so that it gets value. Otherwise it won't have value. Now in the process of linking, this is called istidlal, to link it. Now if this, Now if I want to link it, what do I do? This is one statement. Nothing moves unless it is moved is one statement. But I need to prove this statement also. If this statement is also reflective, it's not valuable. This statement also has to be axiomatic, so that I finally have a strong فَقَدْ اسْتَمْسَكَ بِالْعُرْوَةِ الْوُثْقَى. I'm looking forward to a firm thing, not a hanky-panky, thing that goes away. So this nothing moves unless it is moved is also based on the statement every new occurrence is in need of a cause. And every new occurrence is in need of a cause is an obvious statement. It's an axiomatic statement. You see that? So notice I have linked gravity exists to two axiomatic concepts, two axiomatic essence, and therefore it carries value. Otherwise, if I did not link them to these two things, then it would not be possible. Now, what did I use to do? I used a process called istidlal. Istidlal is this inference of how I kind of arrange these sentences together. Arranging those sentences. And inshallah, once we get it to logic, after a long time. Let us see. Now, so for instance, essence 1, an apple moves from the bare branch towards the ground. This is the first essence. Essence 2, nothing moves unless an external force is applied to it. Result, an apple moves to the ground because of an external force applied to it. You see that? Now this is called a form of logical induction. Problem, big problem. These logical steps that I've used, then naturally I come to this answer. I took essence 1, I arranged it like this. Essence 2, I arranged it like this. and naturally the result came. Is this itself also obvious or not? Because if this process also is not obvious, there's also a problem. Because okay, the essence 1 is obvious, essence 2 is obvious, but what about the process? If the process is not obvious, if the process is not axiomatic, then also there will be a problem. That means I will not be able to link. So I need an obvious process. I need an axiomatic process to be able to create that final answer. So now we'll see that logical processes are axiomatic. How? In the next slide. How are these logical processes axiomatic? This is something that you need to contemplate and pay attention to. Look, under what basis do we say that if two essences which are in the initial propositions, what are, not prepositions, propositions, sorry. What do we mean by initial propositions? In logic, when I say initial propositions, I mean essence 1 and essence 2. So don't get confused, yeah? It's muqaddam. In Farsi, in Arabic, they call them muqaddamat. There is a qiyas, which is a logical inference or logical induction. And then the propositions are called initial propositions are called muqaddamat, okay? So essence 1, how do we show that it will definitely lead to the result? This is because of the type of logical inference used. So sometimes the type of logical induction process that you use is an obvious process, sometimes it is not. Question, how do I understand which process is obvious and which is not, so that I can use the obvious process and therefore come to the right conclusions? That is going to be taught in logic in depth, but I'll just give you a summary very quickly. In logic, so the answer is this. There are two types of logical processes. One, reflective logical inferences and axiomatic logical inferences. Reflective logical inferences, that logical inference which is reflective, you need to analyze it until you return it and revert it back to the axiomatic process. So what they do when there is a reflective logical process, they analyze it. They open it up and they revert it to an obvious. If you can revert it to an obvious and axiomatic process, then it is a correct. But if you can't, then you throw it in the dustbin. Because it takes no one to help you. So that's what he said. Now, the axiomatic logical inferences are called axiomatic because they by simply conceptualizing the two initial propositions and the relationship between them, the intellect assents to the result. Okay, now, I want you to pay attention to this. You remember we talked about the awaliyat. What were the awaliyat? Primary axiomatic essence. Yeah? In primary axiomatic essence, we said you just have to conceptualize the subject and the predicate and the relationship between the two, and you might conclude. Similar to that is this process of induction. You conceptualize the first essence, conceptualize the second essence, and the relationship between the two essence, naturally your mind comes to a conclusion. Now don't worry about this, read these notes and you go home properly, and then you come to know. This is an example of that, and inshallah I'll end you here only, so that you don't waste too much time. And we should.
Yeah. So this is the last part anyway. So now I want you to pay attention to this. I hope I'm not being tired. It's surprising, I was expecting, third, fourth session that police people remain because they just reading opening. I agree. But it's opening up your mind, that's what. And you go home, think about it, read the papers, read the books, very long. Now look, essence 1, A is an example of B. Essence 2, every B is an example. What will be the result? A is an example of B. So simple, yes? This is because it's obvious. It's an axiomatic inference. So now we learn the axiomatic conceptualization. Axiomatic essence.
Now there is a third thing, axiomatic inference. Axiomatic logical inference, which is called an istidlal. Don't worry, inference is not a big word, just this process, SN1, SN2, SN3, SN1, SN2, and result is called an inference, a logical inference. Don't worry about the terminology, yeah? So, notice that here, when the mind conceptualizes the second essence, which is it? Which one is it? Every B is an example of C. And sees that since every B is an example of C, then one of them, one of the C's, one of the B's, which is A, is also an example of C. So easy, yeah? So how did that happen? By conceptualizing. When the mind opened up the concept of C, it saw that inside C there is B, but inside B there is A. You see, so it was just by conceptualizing that the mind quickly concluded. The relationship between A and C is so easily accepted and accepted. It's so easily accepted just by conceptualizing the two initial essence. One realizes that A is an example of C. Now, what you need to do is that whenever you get an inference, any logical inference, try to revert it back to this type of inference. If you refer it back to this type of inference, and your assent 1 and assent 2 both are axiomatic, or they can be reverted to axiomatic. They can be reverted to axiomatic. That is, let's say assent 1 and assent 2 are not axiomatic, but they are based on axiomatic. That is, you can go back and revert them to axiomatic. Then you have such a strong proof. Then you have a proof that you can work on. Then you have the right type of proof, the right type of istidlal. And that time, the knowledge value will be very high. Yeah? Yeah, as I said, even if the first two are reflective, what you need to do, if they are reflective, refer them back, go back until you find a strong foothold. So you need to prove them first. Until they come and that means you see this same process of inference where you put A is essent 1. Now essent 1 you have to prove it through the same process. So the same process you prove essent 1 first. The same process you prove essent 2. Like that. So you can't choose any essent in essent 1 and 2. It has to be proved. Either it has to be an axiomatic or a reflective that has been reverted to axiomatic. Inshallah, recite the salawat, please. In your notes, all of there, in fact, more explanations, so you read them and inshallah it will be clear. If there are any questions, you can ask me. Yeah. The result will be, it will be a reflective inference. It will not be axiomatic because it is a reflective inference that is based on axiomatic inference. But the process that you have used is an axiomatic process. The result will be an axiomatic assent. The result will be a reflective assent. You see, even if you use this process, that doesn't mean that your answer will be axiomatic. It will be still reflective, but a reflective assent that is based on axiomatic essence. The process that you use, though, will have to be an axiomatic inference. There are 2, 3, 4, 5 types of inferences which you learn in logic. From there, all of these inferences can be reverted back to the main type of inference, which is the axiomatic inference. That is strong in logic. But that's how you need to do to be able to understand a text in its process. That's why you see the mujtahids, when they do fiqh and usul and all this, they actually do all this. They refer all of their statements back to either axiomatic essence, and then the inferences that they use are all axiomatic inferences. So you can see how much difficult it is for a faqih to take up one book. Just one book. That's how difficult it is. Inshallah. Thank you very much for your attention. May Allah bless you and protect you through our needs and increase our knowledge. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.